The boy behind the giraffe. It was one of those afternoons where everything seemed a little too loud and a little too fast. The shoppers at Westbury Mall moved like ocean waves, rushing, bumping, never pausing. Kids screamed in the distance, parents scolded. Announcements echoed over the speakers, and someone had just dropped a cup of coffee near the food court. Amid it all, no one paid much attention to the quiet man pushing a janitor's cart near the children's play area. His name was Walter Hayes. He was 63 years old, tall but slightly hunched from decades of mopping, scrubbing, lifting. His gray hair peeked out from under his cap, and his brown eyes, though tired, still held a glimmer of softness. Walter had worked at the mall for almost 12 years. Most people never noticed him, and that was fine with him. But something was different that day. Just as Walter finished cleaning a sticky soda spill near a toy store entrance, he heard a sound, small, muffled, crying. He paused. It wasn't the usual tantrum. This cry was soft, scared, almost like someone was trying not to be heard. He turned his head toward the play zone. Among the plastic jungle animals, behind the oversized blue and yellow giraffe, he spotted something. A boy. He looked about 6, curled up on the floor, knees hugged to his chest, face hidden. The piece of crumpled paper was clutched in his hand. His tiny shoulders shook as he cried, though the sounds were barely louder than a whisper. Walter looked around. People walked past. Some glanced. None stopped. A few kids pointed, but their parents tugged them away quickly. "Don't get involved" was written in their eyes. But Walter couldn't do that. Not him. He slowly set his mop aside, wiped his hands on his pants, and knelt beside the boy. "Hey there," he said gently, his voice low and kind. "You okay, buddy?" The boy didn't answer. His face stayed buried in his arms, but Walter noticed his small fingers tighten around the crumpled drawing. Walter didn't push. He reached into his cart, pulled out a napkin, and laid it gently near the boy. "You don't have to talk, not if you don't want to. But I'm right here, okay?" Still no reply. So Walter sat there, on the cold tile floor, beside a crying boy, behind a plastic giraffe, in a world too busy to care. Minutes passed. Walter didn't check the time. He didn't care about his schedule, his mop, or the trash bin waiting to be emptied. This moment, this mattered more. After a while, the boy peeked up. Tear-streaked cheeks, wet eyelashes, scared wide eyes. Walter gave a little smile. "You like apple juice?" he asked softly. The boy hesitated, then gave the tiniest nod. Walter reached into the bottom of his cart, behind the dustpan, and pulled out a small, unopened juice box. "It's a little warm," he said with a chuckle, "but still tastes good." The boy took it with both hands, like it was a treasure. He drank slowly, like he hadn't had anything all day. Walter just sat, watching him. When the boy was done, he finally spoke. "I can't find my grandma," he whispered. Walter's heart broke a little. "That's all right, kiddo," he said, rising slowly and holding out his hand. "Let's go find her together." The boy stood and took his hand tightly, still clutching the juice box and the crumpled paper. As they walked through the mall, Walter tried to lighten the mood. "You know what," he said, "when I first started working here, that giraffe scared the life out of me." The boy blinked up at him. Walter made a goofy face. "Swear it was giving me the evil eye every time I mopped too close." The boy laughed, a soft, honest sound. "It's got weird eyes," he said. Walter nodded seriously. "Exactly. I knew it wasn't just me." They reached the security station 10 minutes later. The guard on duty, Marcus, was a familiar face. "Hey, Walter. Everything all right?" Walter nodded. This little guy lost his grandma. Figured this was the best place to start. Marcus smiled kindly at the boy. "We'll get her here, champ. Don't worry." A few radio calls later, the mall's alert system quietly began searching. Meanwhile, the boy sat beside Walter again. This time, he didn't cry. Soon, a woman came running, panicked, her purse swinging wildly. "Even," she shouted, out of breath. The boy jumped up. "Grandma." They ran to each other, arms around necks, tears on both sides. The woman held him so tightly, like she thought she'd never see him again. Walter stepped back, hands in pockets, watching quietly. When the woman saw him, she rushed over, still holding Evan close. "Thank you," she said, her voice shaking. "Thank you so much. I was looking everywhere. I didn't know what. Thank you." Walter smiled kindly and shook his head. Just did what anyone would. But that wasn't true. Not anyone would stop. Not anyone would kneel. Not anyone would notice. But Walter did. The rest of Walter's day returned to normal, at least on the outside. He cleaned up a spilled smoothie, helped an elderly man find the bathroom, and waved at the bakery worker who always saved him a chocolate chip cookie. But inside, something lingered. He kept thinking about the boy. Even about his small, scared voice, his crumpled drawing, his soft laugh. Walter knew what it was like to feel lost in a world full of people too busy to care. He'd lived that life, quiet, invisible. That night, he walked home alone, the cold wind brushing his cheeks. He didn't know it yet. But that tiny act of kindness, it was about to change his entire life. 3 days later, the SUV arrived. Walter didn't expect anything to come of it. To him, helping the lost boy had been nothing more than a small moment, a human moment. Something anyone with a heart would do. He didn't tell anyone about it, not even his neighbor, not even the cookie lady at the bakery. It was just another day in a quiet life of routine. But that small act was already traveling far beyond the mall walls. 3 days passed. Same uniform, same mop, same janitor's closet filled with pine-scented supplies, gloves that didn't fit anymore, and an old lunchbox he'd used for 10 years. Walter started his shift like always, before the mall doors opened, in silence. He liked it that way. Just him, the hum of vending machines, and the clatter of his cartwheels echoing in the emptiness. He whistled softly as he swept the glass near the fountain, thinking about nothing in particular. But somewhere deep down, a question still lingered. I wonder if that boy is okay now. By noon, Westbury Mall was back in full swing. Kids shrieked near the carousel, teenagers leaned over the second-floor rails with soda in hand, and pop music poured from speaker systems in every direction. The air smelled of cinnamon rolls and warm pretzels. Walter was cleaning the railing on the upper level when something unusual happened. He heard a rumble. Not loud, but deep. Steady. It wasn't coming from inside. It was outside. Something big. He stopped mid-wipe and walked slowly to the edge of the second-floor overlook. There, in the mall parking lot, 3 large black SUVs rolled in, slow and serious. Their windows were tinted, their paint shining like mirrors under the sun. Behind them came 2 smaller military-style vehicles. Everyone noticed. Shoppers stopped. Phones came out. Kids pressed their noses against the glass. Whispers filled the food court like static. Walter squinted. Security guards walked toward the entrance, confused. But then, the convoy came to a halt, right outside the main doors. The back door of the lead SUV opened. Out stepped a woman. Tall, strong posture, dark green uniform with shoulder stripes. A military woman, clearly high-ranking. She carried a clipboard and had 2 other soldiers walking behind her in formation. She didn't ask questions. She didn't hesitate. She walked straight into the mall like she knew exactly where she was going. And then, she looked up, straight at Walter. He froze. His grip on the cleaning cloth loosened. Her eyes locked with his across the floor space, and she smiled. She stepped onto the escalator. Each click of the steps felt louder than usual. As she approached, people parted ways. Curious onlookers made space, some whispering, others filming. Walter instinctively stepped back, uncertain. The woman stopped in front of him. "Excuse me," she said with a calm, firm voice. "Are you Walter Blake?" Walter blinked. "But yeah, that's me." She extended her hand. "I'm Major Janitor, United States Army." He shook it slowly, still confused. "Is something wrong?" She smiled warmly. "No, Mr. Blake, nothing's wrong. We're here to thank you." Before he could ask more, a small figure stepped out from behind her. Walter's eyes widened. It was Even. But this time, he wasn't crying. He was grinning. He held a folded-up piece of paper in his hand and walked right up to Walter without fear. "You helped me," Even said, his voice louder now. "You stayed with me when I was scared. So, I told my uncle." Walter turned slowly to Major Carver, now even more confused. "Your uncle?" A deep voice responded behind them. "That would be me." Walter turned around, and standing there was a broad, older man in a dark blue military blazer, silver stars on his chest. His presence demanded attention without trying. "I'm Colonel Everett Grant," he said, "retired. Even is my nephew. And when I heard what happened here, I knew I had to meet the man who didn't just walk by." Walter scratched his head. "But I didn't do anything special. He was just a scared kid." "That's exactly why it's special," Major Carver said. "Because most people would have walked away. But you didn't." By now, a crowd had gathered. Mall shoppers, employees, even kids from the arcade had come out to see what was going on. Walter looked around, uncomfortable with the attention. He'd lived most of his life being ignored, overlooked. That was just the way it was. Nobody asked janitors questions. Nobody remembered their names. But now, people were filming him, clapping quietly. Whispers turned to smiles. Then one of the soldiers stepped forward. In his hands was a small wooden plaque. It was engraved, "For exemplary compassion in civilian service, Walter Blake." For choosing kindness when it mattered most. Walter stared at it. He didn't know what to say. His lips parted, but the words were gone. "I don't deserve this," he mumbled, his voice cracking. He was crying. "I couldn't leave him like that." Even stepped closer. He opened his drawing. This time, it had two stick figures. One tall, wearing a janitor's uniform. The other, a small boy holding a juice box. Above them were 3 words, scribbled in colorful crayon. "My real hero." Walter's knees almost buckled. He swallowed hard. His chest felt heavy. Nobody had ever called him that before. Colonel Grant placed a strong hand on his shoulder. "You didn't just help Even. You reminded us all that service isn't always about medals or rank. It's about heart. It's about seeing someone in pain and showing up." Walter finally let the tears fall. For once, he didn't try to hide them. He wiped his eyes on his sleeve and gave Even a gentle nod. "You're a brave kid. I didn't do much, but I'm glad I was there." Major Carver stepped forward. "We're not done," she said. Walter looked up, confused again. "Sir, your story is already spreading." And Colonel Grant pulled a few strings. "What kind of strings?" Walter asked. "That scholarship fund," she said. "The one we're launching for underprivileged kids who show kindness and leadership at a young age. It's going to be named after you." Walter blinked. His jaw fell open. "What? No, you can't. I'm just a janitor." Colonel Grant gave a soft laugh. "You were," he said, "but now you're a symbol of what this world needs more of." People started clapping. Not politely. From the heart. It echoed across the food court, down the escalators, across the toy store. Even the grumpy manager at the shoe shop poked his head out and joined the applause. And Walter? He just stood there, holding the kid's drawing and a plaque in one hand, and something heavier in the other. Hope. It wasn't about fame or recognition. It was the realization that someone like him, someone quiet, overlooked, could still make a dent in the world. A little boy had cried. He sat down. That's all he did. And it was enough to change everything. The hero janitor no one saw coming. The mall never looked the same again. Not to Walter. Not to the shoppers. Not to the world that had just discovered what kindness really looked like in the form of a janitor with tired eyes and a juice box in his cart. A week had passed since that unforgettable moment. When military vehicles rolled into the parking lot, a decorated colonel shook a janitor's hand, and a little boy held up a crayon drawing that said, "My real hero." But for Walter Hayes, life mostly stayed the same. He still clocked in at 7:00 a.m. sharp, still changed into his green uniform in the cramped janitor's closet, still polished the tile floors until they shined like mirrors, and cleared the trash bins that everyone pretended didn't exist. Yet something had changed, not in what Walter did, but in how people saw him. There he is. A little girl with pigtails ran up to him in the food court one morning and hugged his leg without warning. Walter laughed, nearly dropping his mop. "You're the hero, janitor," she chirped. Walter crouched beside her, smiling. "I'm just Walter, sweetheart, but I'll take that hug any day." From that moment on, Walter noticed something strange happening. People made eye contact with him. They waved. They smiled. Some stopped just to say thank you. Even the grumpy donut shop manager, who once grumbled when Walter cleaned too close to his counter, now offered him free coffee every morning. And on the wall above the janitor's closet, a blown-up copy of Avon's drawing, framed and signed by the mayor herself. Every single person in the mall had seen it by now. Every day, someone would pause and read the caption. "This is what kindness looks like. Walter Hayes, our hero in plain clothes." But Walter never let it get to his head. He still swept the mall like before, still helped lost kids find their parents, still picked up crumpled receipts people carelessly tossed under benches. He didn't do any of it for praise. He did it because he knew, deep in his bones, that being seen shouldn't be a privilege. It should be a right, because he had lived in the shadows of life long enough to know what it felt like to be invisible. That afternoon, a quiet visitor. One rainy afternoon, just as Walter finished wiping down the windows near the entrance, a woman walked up to him. She held her son's hand tightly and had a look of hesitation in her eyes, like she had practiced what she wanted to say a dozen times before finally building up the courage. "Excuse me," she said softly. "Are you Walter Hayes?" Walter stood up straight, brushing his hands on his pants. "Yes, Mom. That's me. I just wanted to say thank you." Walter blinked, confused. "For what?" She looked down at her son, probably around 8 years old, glasses sliding down his nose, hands stuffed into his hoodie pocket. "My son, he's been struggling," she said. "At school. With confidence. With bullies. He saw your story on the news. The one with Even and the soldiers and the drawing." She paused. "And he said to me, if a janitor can be a hero, maybe I can be brave too." Walter's breath caught in his chest. The boy looked up at him with a shy smile. "You're really cool," he said. Walter knelt down slowly. "No, buddy," he replied gently. "You're the cool one. And if you ever need someone to talk to, I'm here, all right." The boy nodded and smiled wider. His mom wiped a tear from her eye. "You have no idea what that means to him," she whispered. Walter didn't reply. He just patted the boy on the shoulder and went back to his cart. But his heart, it was fuller than it had ever been. Letters on the table. That night, Walter sat alone in his tiny apartment. A hot mug of tea steamed between his calloused hands. He didn't turn the TV on. Instead, he looked at the growing stack of envelopes on his kitchen table. Letters. Real, handwritten letters. Some were from children, others from parents, even a few from veterans, police officers, teachers. One came from a janitor working in another state. It simply read, "I've been a janitor 32 years. You made me proud of my work again. Thank you." Walter opened one more. It was written in shaky handwriting. Dear Walter, I'm in a wheelchair. Sometimes I feel like I don't matter. But when I saw how you helped that boy, it made me think, maybe I can still help someone too. You made me believe again. Walter wiped his eyes. He hadn't cried this much in years, not from sadness, but from something far more powerful. Being truly seen. The Scholarship Fund. By the end of the month, the Walter Hayes Kindness Scholarship had raised over $100,000. Evan's name was at the top of the recipient list, of course. But the fund wasn't just for him. It was for every kid who chose kindness. For every child who stood up for someone else, who helped a classmate, who did something good even when nobody was watching. Walter never once asked to be part of it. But the mall insisted. The city insisted. He showed up at the award ceremony in his pressed janitor uniform, holding a fresh haircut the bakery lady insisted he get. He didn't make a big speech, just 5 words. Thank you for seeing me. And the room stood in thunderous applause. A final surprise. It was a slow Wednesday afternoon when Evan returned to the mall again. This time, he wasn't with his grandma. He was with his uncle, Colonel Grant. The colonel walked up to Walter with a firm handshake and a warm smile. Thought we'd stop by. Evan's been begging to come see you again. Evan was holding something behind his back. He grinned up at Walter. Close your eyes. Walter chuckled. All right, all right. When he opened them, Evan was holding a small wrapped box. Inside was a brand new name badge. It read, Walter Hayes, Kindness Ambassador. Below that, in small print, Hero of Westbury Mall. Walter shook his head slowly. You little rascal, he said, smiling through his tears. Evan hugged him tight. I'm not scared anymore, Mr. Walter. Walter knelt beside him. I'm proud of you. Promise me something. Evan nodded quickly. When you see someone scared, or lonely, or hurting, you stop. You sit beside them. You show up. I promise, Evan whispered, just like you did. The legacy. Months later, Walter's drawing was still hanging proudly above the janitor's closet. But something else had changed too. Kids began drawing their own heroes. Teachers, nurses, delivery drivers, bus monitors. Kindness was trending. Even a local radio station started a weekly segment called The Walter Way, sharing real stories of small acts that made big waves. And Walter? He kept mopping, kept smiling, kept watching the world shift, one heart at a time. Not because of some grand speech or dramatic moment, but because once, long ago, he saw a little boy crying behind a plastic giraffe. And he didn't walk away. You don't need power to make a difference. You don't need fame. All you need is to care. Walter Hayes didn't change the world with money or titles. He did it with something far rarer, a quiet heart that refuses to ignore pain. And that's the kind of hero the world needs more of.